Anita Hauser.
Hey.
Oh my goodness, I am so thrilled to finally, this is long overdue. This is long overdue to finally have you on Jazz Piano Skills because, you were one of the first adopters of Jazz Piano Skills way back when I started. And you had reached out to me, and we've had a great friendship since then, and we've been have had an opportunity to kind of share with each other your journey, my journey, and it's fascinating. And I've always wanted to get you on Jazz Piano Skills so we can actually share this story beyond just you and me talking. So I can't not thank you enough for carving time out of your day today to come on Jazz Piano Skills.
It's my pleasure, my honor. So thank you so much.
Oh my goodness. Yes. So many listeners are going to love your story, love your journey in music. Because the reality is you're a professional musician and you perform and you play at a very high level, and you've had this amazing journey and searching for ways to improve your musicianship, especially within the realm of jazz. So we're going to get to all of that. But before we get to all of that, I want to turn the microphone over to you, and I want you to share, because I don't know a whole lot about your
Yeah.
childhood and family life and how you got into music. So I want to step back, give you the microphone, and share with us your beginnings, your family life, how you got into music, siblings, and all that kind of stuff. So Anita, the microphone is
Okay.
yours.
All right. Well, I was born and raised in Georgetown, South Carolina, the Low Country. So a little seaport town between Myrtle Beach and Charleston.
Wow.
And music was always just a part of life. And a big part of that was church, growing up in a
Mm-hmm.
Baptist church. And
Mm-hmm.
my grand uncle was the minister. My grandparents sang in a gospel group, and they traveled around South Carolina called the Hallelujah Chorus.
Wow.
And my parents sang in the choir. They weren't professional musicians, none of them, but they all loved music and had a lot of soul and a lot of commitment. So I
Mm-hmm.
really began to sing in church and play the piano, and it was just a great training ground and lots of love there. Sing,
Awesome.
baby, play, baby.
Yep, right. You can do it. You can do it, right?
There you go.
Yeah,
Lots of encouragement, and
right.
didn't start formal piano lessons until maybe 8 or 9. There was a piano in the house. My sister, Andrea, 7 years older, started lessons with our first cousin. They both got pianos, but they had that kind of old school teacher that would tap their wrist with a ruler, and that
Yeah,
was very short lived.
as it always is. As it always is, right?
So that
Oh,
piano sat in the house, and I began to tinkle on it. And I was like, oh, I want to take lessons, but can we find a different teacher?
right.
So she found
Oh,
me a new teacher, and I loved it. And I
oh,
just
that's
loved
awesome.
learning. I was soaking it up and had a couple of different teachers. My first teacher moved away. And so it was just a lot of love,
Yeah,
learning, and
but
recitals. Also,
these lessons when you started, I'm assuming, were just your traditional kind of classical piano lessons, right?
yeah, method
Yeah,
books and then learning some classical
right.
repertoire.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right, right, right.
nothing off the page.
So but that was your first step into like formal education, really getting formal training.
Yeah.
Up until then it's just you doing your natural skills, natural talent, singing in church, being encouraged. But now here
Yeah.
you are studying piano. So where's it
Yeah.
go from there then?
So continuing on, I was in chorus and all of that. And when it came time for college, it was a question, what do you want to do? And I didn't know anything other than music. So
Right.
I didn't think about what the career would look like. I just thought, I love music, so let's do that.
That's how most of us do it, right? We don't think too far down the road. We just go like, "Hey, music, that sounds fun."
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I went to Spelman College in Atlanta, Georgia,
Oh, good. Yeah.
and was a piano major and took a little voice, but I honestly was kind of shy with singing. Used to sing more full out, but honestly, I think a lot changed for me in my childhood. My father died very mysteriously, very tragically when I was 9.
Oh
And
no.
I had a lot of freedom in my expression prior to that. Afterwards, I had to kind of gain it back over the years.
Right. Right.
So, but I really dug in as a piano major, took a little voice lessons. But the cool thing is, a lot of the voice majors would pull me in to play for them.
Right.
I ended up sort of coaching them on parts and things like that. But um,
So
was
even
in,
your so even your piano lessons in college, it's a classical piano performance
yeah,
degree is what you were studying, right? Yeah.
yeah. And it felt like a lot of catch up, as well as I thought I was doing when I got to
Yeah.
college. It's
Right.
like, ooh, I really got to get to work here.
Right, which is the case for most people, right? Most
Yeah,
people, they've gone through high school and they perform in their high school ensembles, and they think, "Hey, I'm pretty good at music," and then they get to college and they find out, "Whoa, I got a lot of catch up to do."
yeah.
Yeah,
So I was in the glee club and I loved that. But then I heard about the jazz ensemble and it was like, ooh, I want to do that. Because growing
yeah,
up, one of the things that I loved of memory of my father was he had these recordings. He'd have his soul records, some
hmm,
gospel, but he also had a jazz collection.
yeah,
And I
yeah,
just love those recordings. To me,
yeah,
it just symbolized like class and sophistication. And I love the freedom of
yeah.
expression. So
Right.
I got in that jazz ensemble, and that just really opened some doors for me.
Wow. So what
Yeah,
did you? I'm curious. So here you are. You have a everything has been kind of a classical training, classical background. Now you're
yeah,
in college, you're majoring in music as a piano performance major.
yeah,
And this jazz band thing intrigues you because you've grown up with great jazz in the house and great music around you. Now you go to your first jazz band ensemble practice and experience. So talk about that a little bit. What was the awakening there?
it's not easy being green. I loved it. It was exciting, but it was sort of like, okay, what are we doing? There's nothing to just straight up read, running chords.
Yeah, just play that, and you're looking at what? Play what? There's nothing here.
Improvise. Okay, great. It sounds great. How do we do that?
Yeah, yeah. Oh my gosh. So it hits you very quickly, right? Like, whoa,
Yeah,
this is a whole different world. This is a whole different musical world that I've stepped
yeah,
into. Yeah. So what did you do? You stepped into this whole world of, improvisation, chord changes. There aren't dots on the page. Okay,
yeah.
so what the heck? What did you do then?
It was like getting a crash course. And our
Yeah.
director, Joseph Jennings, he really took me under his wing and he would work with us as a group. We had singers and I played keyboards, drum, bass. They had different players, but he would pull me to the side and show me chords and voicings and, okay, go work on
Yeah.
this. And this will help you with this song. And I'm like,
Right.
okay. So we
Yeah.
just, I just learned as I went. It wasn't
Yeah.
like a private lesson, but, he did what he could
Yeah.
to kind of train me.
Yeah, and I would assume that it was kind of the learning was always in relationship to maybe the repertoire you were playing, right? So here's
Yeah.
what you need to do on this song. Here's what you need to do on this song. So the
Yeah.
learning was really kind of song specific, right?
Very true.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right, right. Yeah. So okay, so you graduated with a piano performance degree.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so now you walk across the stage, you got your piano performance degree. Now what?
Now what? So my parents were educators. My mom was an
Oh,
elementary school
fancy.
teacher. My father was a guidance counselor. So the whole encouragement was, go into education. They didn't have
Yeah.
an education degree at Spelman. So I don't know what I thought I was going to do, but I totally shifted gears. I think I just wanted to take a break
Right.
and I became a flight attendant. Honestly, totally
makes
shifted.
per- makes perfect sense, right? Graduate with piano performance degree, flight attendant, here I come.
Yeah, totally left field. And my mom was like, "What? You're gonna do what?" But then
Yeah,
she supported that, and I
oh
think it
my
was
god.
actually kind of good for me for a while because it,
Right.
it gave me a chance to kind of get out of my shell and see the world a little. And I
Right.
took lessons a little bit here and there during that time, and I would meet some amazing people on the plane, and
Right.
um, yeah, so.
So are you still do you still do flight attendant?
No, that
No.
was 4 years. I always say that was my 4 year degree in people skills. It
People, there you go. Yeah, there you go.
was a great experience, but no,
So
that's
okay, so I'm curious. So what did you do during that 4 years as a flight attendant? You
yeah,
don't right. Once you get bitten by the music bug, you're bitten by the music bug. You're into music forever. You can't
yeah,
get rid. It doesn't heal, right? That wound will never heal, right? So
correct.
here you are, a professional music. You have a degree in music, professional degree, professional musician. You go off now. You're a flight attendant for 4 years. I know music was tugging at your heartstrings there, right? I mean,
The
always tugging.
time.
Yeah,
Could never
yeah,
get away from it. I actually tried for a while because I felt a little conflicted. Okay. I thought it had to be one thing or the other. Like I had to do all teaching
right, right,
or all
right,
performing. Didn't
right,
really know. Didn't have a mentor at the time to say, no,
right.
this is how you can do. You could actually do both if you wanted to.
Yeah, right,
So, but I took some lessons, some classical lessons for a while, and then also jazz lessons here and there. But with my schedule, it was just a lot going on. But I
right.
always played because I got a piano. That was one of the first things I did with some of my first checks is get a nice piano.
Sure, of course. Yeah, awesome. So, okay, so then after you left, after 4 years of flight attending, you said, okay, I'm done with this. Is that when you kind of shifted back into the music realm, or what happened then?
Actually, not. No. So yeah. So you didn't know all this, did you?
I didn't know any of this. I didn't know
Yeah.
any of this.
Yeah.
Oh,
So no, like I worked for a travel club. I worked for an insurance company. I was really trying to just do something else. All the while music was calling me.
of
And then
course.
life intervened where I had to just, I had started a family, got married, started a
Right,
family, and I
right,
needed to be at home just with my
right,
pregnancy, high risk. And
right,
it was at that time, it was like, okay, what are you doing? And what do you really want to do?
right.
Um, and so I just started raising, I have two sons. They're 27 and 24 now. It's amazing.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. And so when I was home with them, I was playing and we would sing together and I would show them things on the piano. But I still thought I really couldn't have a career in music. That's just how either resistant, stubborn, or just didn't have enough confidence in what I was doing to think that I could do something with it. And I
Right.
think because my parents were educators, honestly, I fought teaching tooth and nail. But
Isn't that
ironically, I'm a very natural educator. I look back even as a teen, I was always showing friends
yeah,
things. And
yeah,
I had a old friend say, "Oh, remember when you used to teach me piano?" And I just didn't even remember. But she was like, "I still remember some of the things that you taught me." So
yeah,
it was
right,
always in me.
yeah,
So it was a few years of just doing other things, but always music was there, always
yeah,
there.
yeah. Yeah, interesting, right? Music's always there. You discover that teaching is in your DNA, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And then you also haven't you found this to be the case? And through your teaching, um, wow, we learn so much, right? Ourselves, we
yeah,
benefit so much musically through showing and teaching and helping somebody else. We end up
yeah,
benefiting just as much. There's no question about that, right?
definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay, so you had your boys and your boys play, right? Aren't they musicians?
Well, one of the younger one is Benjamin. He
Yeah,
plays trumpet. He was in the marching band in
yeah,
college, and he plays
yeah,
cello.
yeah. Right,
Yeah,
that's right.
yeah. And we even had
So,
an opportunity to play in a couple of orchestras together this past year, so that was really awesome.
yeah, and does your husband play, Michael? Is he
He
a
doesn't,
musician?
but he loves music, and he's got
Okay,
a very discerning ear for music too.
I bet he does.
Yeah,
Right. So, okay, so now you've discovered that you're an educator, that you enjoy teaching.
yeah.
Music continues to tug at your heartstrings. So, what happens?
Okay, so where are we on the timeline? Yeah, marriage. I took care of my mom for 4 years, and during that time, I taught a little prior to that, but I opened a music teaching studio, teaching piano and voice. I was
Smart.
also a music director at a church when I lived in Augusta, Georgia. And so
Wow.
that was really the start of me really starting to move forward in music
Yeah.
consistently. No more
Yeah.
starts and stops. So I'm really
Right.
grateful for that experience. And when I opened up the studio, suddenly it was like, okay, these kids are depending on me. So let's just show up and really get into this.
Yeah.
So it was church music, teaching, and I also, for a period of time, was in a R&B band. So that was great, singing and playing.
Right.
And I started taking jazz piano lessons in Augusta.
Yeah. Okay, so let's kind of start there. Now that
Yeah.
we got your background, now you finally come full circle. You're a music educator. You have a professional studio set up. You're teaching piano. You're teaching voice, um, and now you're starting to, and you're performing, and now you're wanting to dip your toe into jazz, even the bathwater of jazz, even more so now. So let's start there. Let's talk
Yeah.
about how you pursued getting into jazz, the study of jazz, ups and downs, and we'll take it from there. So
Yeah.
how did all this happen?
A great teacher in Augusta, Donald Macy.
Okay.
I met him through the Music Teachers Association, him and his daughter
Oh,
Robin.
wonder. Okay,
Yeah,
great.
and so he taught me private lessons, and then he had a class of three, me, his daughter, and another student, Hiroko. We would meet weekly for a class. So a very intimate class, and
Wow, neat.
it was great. You know, he
Yeah.
used materials of Alan Swain. I don't know if
Okay.
you've heard of Alan Swain, but
Sure.
great ways of learning, and it was all new to me. I was soaking it in. It wasn't totally new, but in terms of like training, that was
Right.
new. Whereas I
Right.
was trying to learn on the go or learn
Yeah.
everything from a book without a teacher, things like that.
Right.
So
Right.
he
Right.
just really poured a lot into us, and it gave me something to work towards each week.
Yeah.
So it was really helpful.
So give us a little example of what were some of the things that he had you all doing in those lessons that was beneficial.
So I know with the Alan Swain materials, one book was improvised. It was founded on using scat rhythms so that we can get this emotional connection to the musical
Wow,
ideas that we were playing. So that
which
was
would
fun.
totally yeah, which would totally resonate with you as a vocalist, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, right,
So
right.
I did finally get into the singing more and got certified to teach, and that gave me a lot of confidence with that and in the performing. So we
Yeah,
would do that, and he would have certain musical concepts about articulation and
mhm,
developing one measure and two measure ideas. So he would
right,
have us work on certain skills, and then he had different blues songs throughout the book that we would apply them to.
right,
So
right,
that was cool, and
right. So
his
did you all spend a lot of time working on obviously chord changes, voicings, improvisation then obviously. Was that
yeah.
is that really the core of the study?
Yes, and I got a lot of the harmony in the private lessons
Right,
using the other set of Alan Swain books. It's called like the four-way keyboard system,
right,
learning things orally, tactile, intellectually, and I'm missing one, but just learning it on these different
yeah,
levels.
yeah.
And
That's right, right,
so so everything was root position, but there was like open position, closed position.
right,
But it got me understanding those four sounds of music and how to start building chords in a way that sounded good on the piano. And he had a
right,
certain parameters of, how low to go and all of that. Now, what I
right.
didn't know how to do at the time was how to do rootless voicings so that when I played with the bass player,
Right.
I wasn't stepping on the toes. But the understanding was you have the basics, so now you can build from there.
Yeah, right, right. Does he still teach?
He does, yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, that's wonderful. So, okay, so did you transfer that knowledge then from piano? I'm curious because he, approached it from scat rhythms and vocal rhythms. Did you actually then go, wait a minute, I'm actually not only working on materials that are great from a piano perspective, but I could actually use this material vocal wise as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And he really encouraged me to sing and play. So that
Yeah.
was a cool
Right.
experience, kind of putting them together. I always like to say there's singing, and then there's playing, and then there's singing and
Singing and
playing.
playing. Right.
So it
Yeah.
was a lot. So we were working on things, and he was really encouraging me to put together like a showcase. That didn't happen, but he and his daughter and I were working on an all Gershwin show together.
Mm-hmm.
So what's cool,
Mm-hmm.
as you know, with Gershwin, it's jazz like, a lot of the
Right.
chords.
Right. Right.
And we did a wonderful dress rehearsal, and then the pandemic hit, and everything shut down,
Right. Right.
and kind of the world changed for all of us. But that was a great project that I was working on. And even though that didn't happen, or the dress rehearsal did, it inspired me to keep going and to,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I want to back up a second because I want to go back to the whole concept of playing and singing, right? I think this is one of the big challenges that students have, jazz piano students have, is when they finally are instructed or the revelation finally settles in that they have to sing in order to play. That in other words, the musical ideas are coming from somewhere. They're not coming from the hands. They're just not coming from the hands. They're coming from somewhere deep inside. And of course, the human voice is the most natural instrument that we have. But I think the big challenge for piano students is that as soon as we say singing, right, us non-singers like myself immediately go to like Pavarotti and we go like, wait a minute, I ain't going to sing because I don't sing like Pavarotti. But we're not talking necessarily about that kind of singing when we're talking about singing and playing jazz as a jazz pianist, right? We hear great jazz piano players kind of mumbling or groaning,
Mm-hmm.
in their throat, when they're playing, or you can hear, the growl like Earl Gardner,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And what they're doing is singing.
Yeah.
They're singing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so for you, it probably came very naturally because you were a vocalist and you had been singing since you were a little girl, right?
Yeah.
But this is a big hurdle for a lot of folks studying jazz piano when they realize they're going to have to start kind of singing, and at least internally, to create melodic ideas or to be able to improvise. And I would just say that don't make the mistake that I made in thinking that immediately go into Pavarotti, because that's not the kind of singing we're talking about. Correct?
Right. Correct.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. So important. So okay. So now you here you are now. You got your professional studio going. You've played gigs. You've jumped into the jazz world educationally. I mean, in terms of studying it yourself to get better. And then like the pandemic hits. Okay, so then what happens?
So my entire studio went online.
Right, right.
And where I lived in Augusta, it was a military area. So a lot of people ended up moving. It's kind of interesting. But because it was online, some could continue with me. And then I ended up moving a couple of years later back to Columbia, which is where we are now.
Yeah,
And I still teach, but it's exclusively online. And the studio's thinned out. So I've got this really comfortable number for me, about 10 students.
fantastic.
Like half and half, piano and voice.
Hmm.
And I love it because
Yeah,
I'm still enjoying teaching, and I get to get out there and play the game as far as doing a little
yeah,
performing. And
yeah,
I feel like it inspires me actually more for teaching.
yeah. So
Having
are you teaching some jazz? Are you teaching some jazz piano to some students?
Well, that's something that I have been dipping my toe into. So yes, I
Good,
have an adult student
good.
and she loves it. She loves learning it because she sings very well and wants to get more proficient with her skills, and she would love to be able to accompany herself and just,
Yeah,
develop as a
yeah.
musician.
That's fantastic. So, okay, so now let's talk jazz piano. We got your background. We got the whole scoop on Anita now, and now we got the big picture here and understand what's going on. So now here you are. You are an avid lover of jazz. I can attest for that, and you are you study jazz, you love the study of jazz. So talk to us a little bit about that journey and some of the, um, you know, frustrations, I guess I could say, or
Yeah.
hurdles, I guess, maybe a better word, hurdles that you've been jumping, and some of the challenges in jumping those hurdles as a jazz student, as a jazz piano student. Are you
Yeah.
open with sharing some of that with us?
Sure, definitely. So I think it
Okay.
comes down to what to focus on. How do I
Yeah.
break this down? I'm getting this great training, I'm taking it home. But
Right.
it was always a question of, okay, how do I practice this in a
Hmm.
way that it's going to really stick and make a difference?
Right.
So
Right.
that was the biggest thing. So I was always asking questions, okay, how do you do this? And how do you break this down?
So smart, Anita, because if you don't ask the question how, right, then jazz information. The big complaint that I have about the jazz education world is that it seems to be. I use the expression. It seems to be very wide and very shallow. In other words, there's a lot of information out there spread out all over the place,
Yeah,
but it doesn't go very deep. It doesn't get into a lot of the how, right? We get a
yeah,
lot of what. We get a lot of what, oh, you need to do
a lot of
that, you need to do that, you need to do that, you need to do that, and so on and so on. We get pointed in a million directions, right? So we get a lot of what. Um, occasionally we get some whys, which I think are important. Whys are important, but very rarely, it seems like very rarely, we get how.
yeah.
And the jazz student is left with a lot of whats, very little whys, and very few, if any, hows. Would you agree?
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
It just felt like this big batch of information that
Yeah.
I was
Right.
doing my best to boil down, but I didn't know how to boil it down.
Right. And
So,
and you can attest to that, right? If you don't ask those questions, how, the
yeah,
why and the how, then you're constantly kind of like a dog chasing its tail. You end up kind of running in circles, creating a lot of commotion, but feeling like there's very little forward motion. I mean, it's kind of like this big whirlwind that just keeps going around and around and around,
yeah.
right? So,
Probably a big challenge was I was learning tunes, or so I thought. And I did, it seemed for a while, but I
right,
didn't
right,
really learn from the beginning, like the DNA, like you talk about, learning
yeah,
the harmony, learning the chord progressions, like really,
right,
really
right,
knowing it.
right,
So I would lose them, or
yeah.
I'd have to depend on the lead sheets.
Yeah.
And
Which again, right, which is again remains very it's very shallow, right?
yeah,
It doesn't dig deep. That's why it doesn't stick. That's why I'm always saying tune practice, playing tunes won't get you there. Playing tunes are important, it's fun, but playing tunes alone just is not going to get the job done. It takes shallow information and keeps it shallow.
hmm. And you're really the first person to say that. And when I heard it, it was just like ding, ding, ding. Okay, that makes total sense.
Right. Right. So
Yeah.
yeah, we need a lot of the why and how. So talk to us about some of your whys and hows. You've got a lot of information. So how are you practicing? How are you structuring jazz data, if you will? Right? How are you structuring the data to maximize the benefits of your practice time? Talk to
Yeah.
us about that.
And so what I'm doing now, it's even shifted from when I first started working with you through your materials. I think because I was just getting acclimated to this whole new way of learning, I had to even assimilate that and get an
Right.
understanding like I don't have to conquer the world. I just need to focus on some things. So what I'm
Right.
doing now is of course, your great podcast each week comes out. I'm challenging myself to focus there and really literally going through every skill set, approaching it like, okay,
Yeah.
this is my assignment.
Yeah.
And yes, if I don't complete it, I don't complete it. But I'm trying to focus to get that done because I know that I'm building skills. And then when I come to your class, I'm trying to take away one thing from the class that I can create as an assignment for myself. So it's like I'm
Good.
creating this outside of your materials, a to-do list. And I
That's
started a card file, and that's been really helpful. Actually, a mentor of mine suggested that
right.
because I'm taking some lessons with him now because I'm
Good.
learning to write songs, and he's helping me with music theory. But a card file where I have it by category, the different things, chords, improv exercises. And
Mm-hmm.
so this helps me focus so that I'm not
Right.
trying to do a million things. It's just like, okay, I'm going
Yeah.
to do this.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. That's right. I have said for a long time, right, that every single practice session should have a single practice objective,
Yeah.
right? Single practice session, single practice objective. So the mindset of thinking, which this is very common, right? And I mean, we all fall into this trap at some time, in that, okay, I'm going to sit down for an hour to practice, and I'm going to do A, B, C, D, E, F, and G in this hour. And that is just, talk about overload. That's setting ourselves up for complete total failure. It's
Yeah.
just too much,
It is
too
too
much,
much.
right? And we all try to do that. And so then what happens is, as the student, we become what? Overwhelmed
Yeah.
with all this information that we're trying to cram into an hour,
Yeah.
which seems like a lot on the surface. I got an hour to practice, right? But an hour of jumping from one bucket to another bucket to another bucket to another bucket is fatiguing,
Mm-hmm.
right? So so happy to hear that you have this card catalog, that you're keeping track of things. You have these buckets that you're putting information into, and then
Yeah.
pulling that from that specific bucket when you sit down to practice. That only makes sense, right? Because you've heard me say this before, that if music isn't organized and clean and easy here conceptually upstairs,
Yeah.
then you have no shot down here at the keys. I mean, we're just kidding ourselves to think that something's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're organized, like what you're suggesting, what you're talking about, like what you're implemented into your own routine, what happens? Everything starts to become organized and structured and clear here. So now, Anita, you have a shot here, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I'm imagining that you've seen a lot of growth in your own playing because of that.
yeah. And it
Right.
allows me to stay on something long enough to actually make progress instead of jumping here, jumping there. But yet you
Right.
still keep us moving forward. I like that. So that's why I've taken the podcast as it's like I'm taking a weekly lesson with you. It's how it feels.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Well, and you used a really important word, right? That moving forward. I'm a constant believer that we have to generate forward motion
Yeah.
in our practicing. There's always has to be a forward movement. So that's why I'm saying, like, when we move like from one key to another key to another key, and I make the comment like, well, if you don't have everything down in the key of F, well, too bad, because we're moving the B. We're moving on. We're moving on to B
Right.
flat. Don't worry. We'll pick up the loose ends when we come back around, right?
Hmm.
And I think that kind of mentality, what you just said there, that word forward, moving forward, is so vitally important for our continued motivation and development and growth in our playing.
Yeah. So I
Right.
even had to grow in that. I'd say maybe a year ago, I was like, oh no, I wanted to stay on something even when you move forward. But I learned like, no, that's impossible. So I just
Right.
challenge myself now, do the best I can in that week and
That's
then
right.
move on.
That's right.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. I give an example of a student I still teach, and his name happens to be Bob as well, and he's an engineer. And I think you've heard me tell this story where he comes in and he says to me, "I have a game plan." I said, "Man, I love game plans. What's your game plan?" And he said, "My game plan is I'm going to stay in the key of C till I have everything perfect in the key of C. Then I'm moving on." And I said to him, I said, "Bob, I got some really bad news for you, bro." I said, "You're going to be in the key of C for like ever, forever."
Yeah.
So I said, bad game plan. Bad game plan. We're moving on to F. so
Yeah.
so that's awesome. So okay, so let's talk about some of your buckets then. You know, harmony. When you're talking about harmonic development, what kind of things are you working on for harmonic development?
So I've worked on just working on the voicings.
Yeah, that's very good.
But honestly, a lot of it is just following the podcast. I find that I'm really getting a lot of forward motion just following the
Good.
plan and trusting and then letting go when it's time, when something new comes out on Tuesday. I'm like, okay, that's enough of that. Let's see what's next.
Yeah, that's
Um,
good.
yeah, but
Yeah,
just,
because Yeah, because everything really, right? What I try to do with the podcast episodes and the lessons, there's a connectivity there to all of it, right? I mean,
yeah,
it's not like all of a sudden on next Tuesday, we've been going right, and then all of a sudden next Tuesday there's a huge left turn that goes a whole different direction. You're like, what the heck? Where did that come from? I mean,
yeah,
you see the continuity of it all, right? How it all
yeah,
just kind of looks like a snowball rolling downhill. It just keeps getting bigger and bigger. Everything keeps building on top of each other.
yeah. So like even if I'm working on like you had this improv exercise, with the chunks, shapes, and sounds. And I
Yeah,
even
right,
created a
right.
little log in my card file so that as I'm doing the different sounds, I can check off the ones I've done.
Oh,
And
fantastic.
when I'm improvising in the right hand using those chunks, shapes, and sounds, I'm reviewing the voicings in the left hand. So
Oh,
that helps to
fantastic.
reinforce that. So I'm starting to see. I remember you said this in the beginning, it seemed like all of this information, and then
Right.
now it's coming together.
That's right. Yeah, that's a really interesting point, because that what you just said there, right, is, and I will tell you that uh, you're absolutely right on track, right? Because you've heard me say this before too, right? That I know how somebody's progressing by the questions that they ask and the statements that they make. I can tell how they're doing. I just have to listen to what questions they ask and what statements they make. And when you make a statement like that, it tells me that you are so spot on and that you're moving down the road the right direction, because everything should all this information should start to actually, the walls of all this information should actually start to feel like the walls shrink, that like they're coming in,
Hmm.
right? They're
Yeah.
coming inward. It's not like we want to think of always want to think of education as the process of pushing the walls outward, right?
Right.
That more and more information, bigger, 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 bigger. But the reality of it is, we should, as teachers, and you get this as a teacher, we should dump everything out on the kitchen table as quickly as possible. The
Yeah.
big picture, right? The big picture, all the components of everything that's needed in order to play jazz piano. And then the process of education should be to take that big picture and then move those walls inward, that the connectivity is illuminated and everything becomes smaller and smaller. That world becomes smaller and smaller because everything is just so connected together. So the fact that you're
Absolutely.
making that statement, Anita, I say, hey, congratulations. That's awesome, because that's what you should be experiencing.
Yeah. And one thing
Yeah.
I noticed, like the card file, there's not a lot in it. It's very
Right.
well defined. Now, and I'm
I
really
love that.
okay. I'll be honest with you. At first, when you have your illustrations and lead sheets, I used to think, oh my goodness, all this I'm printing. But I'm happy to print it now because that's what I have a lot of is the handouts, and I'm using them
Right.
for that week, and then I'm moving forward. But it really keeps me focused.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the other thing that I'm challenging myself to do is I'm using the lead sheets as a reference, but then I'm looking away and really looking at my hands and doing my best to imbibe what it is that's written. So I'm not
Yeah.
just reading it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah.
So how has your approach to improvisation changed over the last, 5 years? I mean, how has it evolved for you, right? Because improvisation is like, it's like the the pinnacle. It's what everybody strives for in jazz, in the study of jazz, the ability to sit down, play changes, and improvise. So how has that evolved for you?
Yeah, so I'd say the biggest difference is I used to just try to jump right into a tune and improvise. I don't do that anymore. I I have to first work on the skill, just working on the sound, working
Yeah.
on the rhythm, working on the
Right.
articulation. So using
Right.
those chunks, shapes, and sounds. So
Yeah.
I'm not even touching the tune at first. And I am
There
starting
you
to
go.
learn some more tunes, but just really looking at it from a skill standpoint, not looking at it like I'm doing this for the tune.
So smart, right? Because when you look at it from a skill standpoint, what you start to realize that all these tunes draw upon the same skills,
Yeah.
right? So therefore you get to a point. I had a mentor in my life that when I asked him, how do you know so many songs? He said, what are you talking about? They're all the same. And I used to think, man, that's the goofiest comment I've ever heard in my entire life. But now, 40 years later, I look back on that statement. That statement haunts me because it it was so confusing at the time, and now I realize how profound it is because the depth of his understanding of music was at a skill-based level, right? All these skills, harmonic movement, harmonic structures, chord scale relationships, major and minor thirds, and how those thirds are constructed to create sound from the root to the all this stuff. All this stuff was utilized in all these tunes, and so
Yeah.
now he can make that comment that, well, what are you talking about? They're all the same, right? Again, these are the walls doing what, right? The
Coming.
walls coming in. So
Yeah.
if you can get to the point to where when you're playing music, every song that you play is the same, how close are those walls?
Yeah.
I mean, I think those walls have probably then collided and now they're one,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So again, the statement that you're making, that the way you're approaching your practicing of a tune, the very how, an improvisation, the way you're approaching, is spot on, right?
Yeah.
So you've had great results with that, obviously.
Yes. So sometimes I might even look to see, well, what are some of the progressions in the songs that I'm going to be working
Right,
on, and what are
right.
some of the chords? And I'll, before I'm even approaching that, I'm just working with those sounds. Maybe putting a couple, 2 5 1s together, or whatnot. And then when I do go to the song, I love using Band in the Box. I do have that.
Yep. Oh,
And
good, good.
we're starting slow, turning that tempo down, and just taking my time and working
Yep,
through,
yep.
and grunting,
Yeah.
playing, kind of singing those ideas as I play.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, and I'm glad you got like Band in the Box because what it allows you to do is take those skills and
Mhm.
place them into a musical context, into a
Yeah.
musical setting, so you actually hear that. Wow, these skills are music,
Yes. Yeah.
right? They are music. They are the essence of music, right? So, well, that's fantastic. So, voicings. You know, when you were studying jazz, somewhere along the journey, right? You had to be thinking voicings are confusing. How do you voice chords? I mean, at least maybe I'm putting words in your mouth. If I am, please say
No.
move on. But I have found that with every piano student, I remember I used to, voicings to me used to be so um, absolutely baffling to me. In fact, to the point that I remember I went into the practice room in college one day and I took a stack of paper and I said, I'm going to go into this practice room and I'm going to write out every single possible way to voice a C major chord. And I'm not going to leave any stone unturned. I'm going to I'm going to write out every way to voice this chord. And I left with a stack of paper with all these voicings that were just crazy. It was craziness, right? It was just craziness. And I actually gave it to a professional jazz pianist. I said, uh, with my chest pumped out, I said, you know, check this out. And he looks at it very confused, very confused. By the way, this is the same guy that said all songs are the same. He looks at it very, very confused, and he says to me, what am I looking at here? As he's turning the pages and he's looking at all these weird voicings, and he says, what am I looking at here? And I said, well, what are you looking at? I said, you're looking at every conceivable way to play C major 7. he said, he said here's another comment that haunts me. He says, well, we only use a few, right? And I said, huh? What? What do you mean we only use a few? Yeah. And then you started showing me how to voice, right?
Yeah.
So all of that to say to you, yeah, voicing was always confusing for me, very baffling.
Yeah.
How have you approached your voicing study? And I think I know how you have because we've talked about this, but but talk to me about how you've come in that area of playing jazz.
Yeah. So after I went through those Alan Swain books, he had two of them, went completely through them, had a good
Yeah,
understanding,
yeah,
only root position. Then I was confronted with, okay, then what else? And how do I have rootless voicing? So then I was introduced to like this huge book, and it just felt like too much information. Like, okay, there's got to be an easier way. It really, I looked at it for a bit, tried to make sense out of it, and I just gave up. I was like, it's
right. Of course, of course.
and so I just kind of reverted back to what I knew. Um, so I just appreciate the voicings that you shared. And what I'm seeing is at first it felt like trying to understand a formula, but now the more I use them and work with them, the more sense it made, and how it's just these are very great options. And it's not like I threw away everything else I learned. It
Correct.
it was added to what I know. And so
Correct.
now it's a combination of things, just how you talk about how the voicings can be interchanged. Same thing with
Right.
everything else. Everything is
Right.
serving. So when I do play, like I have some sense of where to go with the
Yeah.
voicings.
Yeah. It comes back to shapes again, doesn't it? It
It
comes back
does.
to it
Yeah.
does it comes back to like what are these shapes? What are these sounds? So these are this shape here could be a minor sound. This shape could be a major sound based on how I'm looking at it and so forth.
Yeah.
And so it's really being kind of locked in from a perspective of really locking into shapes, those shapes and sounds, as opposed to, like you said, kind of a formulaic. You may have to use a formulaic approach at first to analytically kind of think
Hmm.
through it. But after you kind of get through the analytical side of things, you want to just kind of now shift gears and focus on the shape and associate the shape with the sound and
Yeah,
leave it at that. Right.
exactly.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's what began to happen. And then I started seeing how one shape really had different sounds that it could be used for
Yeah.
different sounds, and that was awesome. I was like, oh, this is great.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a teacher one time, Anita, say to me, Bob, if you ask a teacher a question and that teacher doesn't answer your question in two or less sentences, find a new teacher. And
Wow.
I went,
Hmm.
wow. Right. He said, they need to give you the answer. Now they can expound upon it, but the answer should be immediate. When you
Yeah.
ask a musical question, the answer should be immediate. And then there could be, expound on it a little further, but the answer should be immediate. So the reason I bring that up is because for anybody listening, if you go to any music store or online store and you're looking at a book on chords and it's that thick, that's more than two sentences.
Yeah, very true.
That's more than two sentences. And the fact that it's that thick should lead us to a thought of, wait a minute, are you telling me that every jazz piano player has that thickness in their head? Hmm. I'm not sure I buy that because I'm not sure anybody's capable of having that much data here,
Yeah.
right? Which goes back to the gentleman when he said to me, we only use a few, right? Ah, well, now that makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes really good sense. In fact, that makes me feel good. I think I can learn this,
Yeah.
right? So that's just a little friendly tip. If you're looking at a book that thick, full of information on one topic, are you kidding me? That's way too complicated.
It'll take me forever to learn that stuff.
Correct. Right. It tells you that the explanation is skewed. It's way too. It's like trying to treat. It's like trying to treat a chord in root, first, second, third, and fourth inversion as four different chords.
Right.
That's bad teaching. Right. It's too scattered. So okay. So what what are your goals as a developing jazz pianist? Ultimately what is it that you're wanting to do with it all?
Well, wanting to share music,
Yep.
wanting to be just having this comfort level of walking into any musical situation that I'm inspired to be a part of and being
Yeah.
able to contribute and
Yeah.
to enjoy it.
Well, and you're doing that because I just heard a recording of you not too long ago that you shared with me with a performance that you had, that vocal performance and piano performance with a solo, and it was fabulous. It was really
Thank
good.
you.
Yeah.
That was the
Are you?
Columbia Community Orchestra.
Oh my
And
gosh.
most of that music was arranged by a good friend of mine, David Ezell, and
Yeah.
he's been a great mentor. He's the one I'm taking the music
Oh,
theory.
fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. But yeah, your playing is fabulous, and your singing is out of this world. So
thank
holy
you.
moly. Yeah. You can do it, Anita. You can do it.
I can do it. And I'm really believing that now, and
Yeah.
that's okay. But it
Yeah.
doesn't give me a big head to believe in myself, and
Right.
it's
Right.
possible for me to teach and perform, and
Yeah.
everyone's got a different pathway. So I feel like I'm starting to really find my place. So
Yeah.
some things I would like to do? I'd like to do some performing locally. I don't know how that works. But as far as the regular typical jazz scene, how one gets into that, and
Yeah.
maybe I have thoughts about smoky clubs, but there probably aren't smoky clubs. I'm just not sure kind of where I fit. But one
Yeah.
thing I can tell you, my friend David Ezell and I have started. We haven't begun it yet, but we're going to do a monthly kind of ensemble, a monthly get together where we do jazz just once a month. And it's kind of
Fantastic.
a combination of a concert slash devotional service, if you will, for lack of a better word. Sort of like a
Yeah.
spiritual community, because
Yeah.
jazz for me has always been the symbol of freedom. And
Yes.
I have this deep desire to be close to God and to know the truth of what I am. So for me, the music is very spiritual, and so we've kind of created our own way of expressing, and I'm open to other things as well. So
It's fantastic. So as the educator in you now, I want you to talk
yeah.
as from the educator side of you. What words of encouragement, inspiration would you share with the listeners? Folks that are beginning their journey in jazz piano. Uh, what would you say to them to help them remain motivated in their pursuit?
You can do it. You just need to get with someone who can really break things down, like Dr. Bob, and give
Oh,
you clear and concise pathway. And for me, as far as skills, have a requirement of myself at least 30 minutes a day. The ideal would be an hour. That doesn't always happen, but just making
right,
this commitment, like I'm going to work on my skills daily, like make it
right.
important and know that you can give yourself that.
Hmm.
And I use timers. So before I do anything, I'm very clear about what I'm about to work on. And then I decide how much time I'm going to spend on that thing. And I set a timer. And I don't know, for some people that may be a lot, but for me, that really helped me focus. And so it's a great sense of accomplishment when that timer rings. It's like, okay, pencils down, let's wrap it up, move on. And it's such
Yeah.
a great feeling of accomplishment. And I get up going, okay, I put the time in.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's awesome. And would you not agree, if it's only 15 minutes, well then do 15 minutes.
Yes, because every day is different. That's exactly
Right.
what I tell my students. It's not, we just do what we can. So if you can't do 30, do 15, shoot, do 10, do
Do
something
10.
consistently.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. I talk to students all the time about stealing practice time.
Ah,
Steal it, right? So if it's 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there, 5 minutes over there, steal it. Those little five
exactly.
minutes, those little minutes add up. So don't fall into the trap of thinking that you have to have, like we talked about earlier, like an hour set aside
Yeah.
to try to sit down and practice. If you do, fantastic. But if you steal time, you can be very productive as well.
Very true. Yeah.
Yeah, very good. So, are you doing? I know you were. You mentioned that you were wanting to get out and do some gigs. I'm sure that will come, like small ensemble stuff is what you're talking about, like trios, jazz trio, jazz
I would
quartet
love
stuff.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think that will happen for you. So
Thank
we'll
you.
talk about more about
Yeah,
that
maybe I
approach.
have some ideas for me.
Yeah, that's great. So Anita, I got to tell you, it's been a joy having you today on Jazz Piano Skills, and I just want to take a moment to tell you, just personally, it's been a thrill to get to know you over these last few years because of Jazz Piano Skills, and a dear teacher, a mentor of mine, Al Franz, and I say this, all the time when I meet folks like yourself, that he used to say the greatest thing about music is the people that you meet through it,
Really
and
true.
and meeting you has been an enormous blessing for me. And I have to tell you, I think you're one of the kindest, sweetest, and most genuine person that I've ever met. And
Oh,
I'm thrilled to have you in my life, and thrilled to have you as part of Jazz Piano Skills. It's just been a huge, gigantic blessing.
thank you so much. That is so beautiful. I really appreciate that. And
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember this, but when I met you, one of the things I said was, you are like an answer to my prayer, because I just knew that I was kind of missing something in this whole how to study jazz thing. And when I saw your website and started getting your emails, I said, this is what I've been looking for.
Oh well.
So I have not stopped. And even though, we've moved and, sometimes I can't get to class, I'm always working on it. And I'm
Oh,
just
I
so
know you are. Yeah, I know you are, and you're always asking great questions and great insights and great statements. So I'm so proud of you, and I'm so proud of your journey and the accomplishments that you've have made musically and outside of music as well, as a wife and as a mother and a family. Yeah, I think it's beautiful, and I'm just so happy for you all.
thank you so much.
Great. All right, Anita, this was long overdue. And I just have one more question for you. And I want you to, if you're comfortable doing so, I want you to promise that you'll come back on Jazz Piano Skills in the future again.
Oh, I would love that. We can do an
Oh,
update.
I'm going to hold you to it. I'm going to hold you to
Okay.
it. All right, Anita, thank you so much for, again, carving out time out of your day and sharing your life, your story with all the Jazz Piano Skills listeners. So much, so very much appreciated.
Oh, you're very welcome, and thank you.